Hi, everybody. Welcome to the SnapRefund podcast. My name is Anise Taylor,
And I'm Cody Eddings.
and we are glad to be back with another episode. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about redesigning insurance for the new American consumer, and we have Katie Upton, Head of Finance from Sigo Seguros. Sigo Seguros is a Texas-based insurtech company founded in 2019, dedicated to providing accessible and equitable auto insurance solutions for immigrant and working class communities, particularly within the Latino and Spanish speaking populations. Recognizing the challenges these communities face in obtaining their insurance coverage, Sigo Seguros offers a mobile first platform that simplifies the insurance process, eliminating unnecessary fees and bias rating factors such as credit scores and employment history. Katie Upton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Indeed. So, Katie, do you want to just start off in letting us know a little bit about your background and how you got into insurance and ended up at Sigo Seguros?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, I started my career actually in management and strategy consulting out of school. I moved to New York. I worked at Accenture and then BCG. But then I was really interested in pursuing strategy at a startup. And it just so happened that my hometown, where I'm from, Columbus, Ohio, has a ton of insurtech. And so prior to Sego, I was looking at startups and joined Beam, what was then Beam Benefits, or excuse me, what was then Beam Dental and is now Beam Benefits. And that is a dental insurance company that has then expanded to employee benefits, hence the name change. And so, really joined Beam and started their strategy function. Enjoyed the work there, but really felt that I wanted a company where I was more tied to the mission. And so, apart from my work life, I've always been passionate about helping the Hispanic immigrant community, and I speak Spanish fluently. So I was really interested in what I learned about Sigo Seguros when I found out about the company. I connected with Nestor and then was brought on as his chief of staff to start and really did a little bit of everything, helping him out, and then kind of shifted into the finance function, I believe, November of last year. So since then, I've been helping out with the finance function, but also continue to help out as with startups, we wear a lot of hats. So still helping Nestor and helping to grow Sego.
That's amazing. One thing you said that I want to touch on really interesting. So you had a personal connection to the market you serve, and I think that's huge when it comes to founder market fit. What were some of the traditional barriers that you saw to people in that community getting insurance, and what made you say, "All right, we have a better way to serve that market"?
Definitely. So we, as I think you mentioned, we are in the non-standard car insurance space. So that is just a catch-all term for anyone who can't go through standard channels, going online and getting a quote. So a lot of times folks that are in the Hispanic immigrant and working class community, instead of going directly through a direct-to-consumer channel, need to go through agents, given the fact that they might not have a credit score or U.S. driver's license. And so that a lot of times comes with the hassle of having to go in person, but also a lot of added fees and predatory pricing. So we, or rather, Nestor and Julia, our co-founders, saw this happening in the market, both with personal connection with family and friends, and then also seeing at the same time the trend of private equity roll-ups of these agencies were incentivized to do something about it and offer a product that was direct to consumer and with fair pricing that didn't use credit scoring and didn't require a U.S. driver's license.
That's fascinating. So, you talk about your approach to credit scores, and how do you guys approach the underwriting without credit scores?
We For underwriting without a credit score, we use a lot of different market data in order to be able to underwrite, and we require, everything is done digitally online, and so you can quote and bind through our website, and then we have an underwriting team that then goes in and reviews everything. But we find that credit score is not a good proxy for risk, and we're able to pro kind of go through the underwriting process without it. And that way, we find that we're giving a fair price without penalizing folks who might not have a credit score because they literally just arrived in the country.
That's
That's
fair.
really interesting. What do you do in situations where you might not have sufficient data on someone who wants to be a policyholder? How do you handle those moments where there's a bit of an unknown? What's that like?
There's always an unknown, but at the same time, there is a lot of industry data that we can leverage. And so that we try to leverage what we can, but at the same time, there's pricing for risk that you don't know with the unknown, but at the same time, also not using that to your advantage to price in a predatory way. So still hitting our target loss ratios while at the same time giving folks a fair price. That's also not so much my realm of expertise, just to be fully transparent, but at the same time, we're all aware and wanting to make sure that we're pricing fairly and also pricing profitably. So definitely from that perspective, it is in my wheelhouse, but we have great members of the team who are more dedicated to that function.
I
Well,
love
I
that.
really love that with what you guys are doing. And, I've seen just the work that you guys do in the community and how you're able to really create this seamless experience for underserved drivers. Being director of finance, what's something behind the scenes that most people don't really realize is critical to your success?
I think that what's critical to our success is being really, really in the weeds analytically in terms of our loss ratio performance by geography and different segmentation. So we try to be really intentional about how we price and how we target different markets. And so I'm helping with that analytics, but then also we're partnering cross-functionally with marketing to make sure that we are doubling down on places where we find that, it's a profitable business. And so really being knowledgeable about the numbers and being data driven is super crucial to the business overall and to my function.
That's interesting. It makes a lot of sense. It leads me to wonder, how do you find that balance between growth and staying true to your mission?
Definitely. I think it's super important because we talk about it a lot. For example, with the idea of fees, there's a line between profitable growth and pricing to, again, a target loss ratio where you're taking into account the fact that you have that unknown risk and you want to price to make sure that you're able to stay in business to serve your customer tomorrow, not just today. And that's the same thing with fees. So we've always advertised and stood true to the fact that we don't want to charge these exorbitant fees that you see at an agency, but at the same time, there are fees that are coming from the state of Texas, for example, that we need to pass along or things like that. And so finding the balance between, again, fair pricing, fees that make sense to help us continue to stay in business, but also not taking advantage of the customer is definitely something that we kind of weigh when we think about the mission. And it's also making sure that we're choosing risk and pricing based on risk for folks that we think are actually helping and, preventing anything where we would have maybe more of, the underwriting where we would want to prevent any sort of fraud or anything like that. That's kind of where we always try to make sure that we are pricing appropriately to serve the people that we really want to serve.
Yeah, I really love your mission and how you guys are serving the people that you really want to serve. And how is it within that process that you guys are building the trust in the community, especially for a group that's been historically excluded from insurance?
Definitely. I think that it's very interesting to hear traditional carriers, traditional incumbents come into the space and just think that all that they need to do is advertise in Spanish when there's much more of a cultural component to it. So I think part of it is a testament to our marketing and the strength of our marketing team, which not only speaks in Spanish to our consumer, but also speaks culturally in a way that connects with understanding our demographic on a deeper level. And then from there, what's really been impressive to me is when we look at surveys at the end of the buying process, over 50% of our customers say that they heard about us through word of mouth, which really speaks to the power of those immigrant referral networks. And if you are showing that you're a good insurance, if you show that you're a good company, that others will speak highly about you to their friends. And that's how we found that we've gotten a lot of folks as well. And so that
That's,
trust is huge.
I think that's everything, especially with the modern landscape. I think it's no surprise to all of us in the industry that consumer trust is probably at an all-time low. I mean, there's so much external pressure on the market from so many places. So, are there any learnings around product market fit that stood out to you or maybe surprised you as you've matured along this journey?
I would say that from my entrance into Sego, we already had achieved product market fit. So it wasn't so much surprising for me, but I was super impressed when I then learned that stat about word of mouth. And it was surprising to hear the percentage because it's just so high. But at the same time, when you really think about it, when everything seems maybe unknown or scary, you really are going to rely on people in your network as you're arriving to a new place that can actually speak to, oh, this is actually going to give you the insurance that you need. This is actually a real company. As you said, consumer trust is at an all-time low across the board, but when we think about this specific group, even more so because so much is new.
Yeah, it really is. And you guys are doing the work. We talk about Nestor and the entire team. Tell us a little bit more about the team and just the work that you guys are doing collectively with the founders.
Sure. So Nestor and I are constantly working together. We speak every day. And so it's really been great to come in as his chief of staff and then be able to shadow him and see what it's like for him as a co-founder. So that experience has been incredible. And I think he as a leader really leads with a lot of transparency, which is something I've taken as a learning and something that I would really want to emulate as a leader in the future. So that's been really helpful. And our team is small but mighty, and him leading with that transparency really allows everyone to cut through the BS and really get to things efficiently, which I really appreciate. And I'll say the same thing about our co-founder, Julio, who's again, very, very in the weeds, super transparent, and also leads by example with how he wants the team culture to be. And so I've really appreciated learning from them. And that has been truly a highlight of my experience at Sego.
Yeah, I knew from the moment that I met you and Nestor, which has probably been almost, gosh, like 3 or 4 years at this point. I could tell that you all were a well-oiled machine. So definitely kudos for that.
Yeah, it's funny. Nestor the other day said a new idea, and I said, "That's an idea I haven't heard from you before." I'm shocked because we're just so attached at the hip at this point, but it's great. It's great working together.
So, is there a certain tech stack or series of tools that are really critical for the way Sego runs to deliver on your mission and your product? Do you tend to approach things building more internally? What does it look like behind the scenes, kind of like how the sausage is made, so to speak?
Definitely. Tech is super important to us because we are D2C and we've invested a lot in tech and automation in a space where really no one has or everyone is struggling to do so. So our tech stack is critical. I would say we rely heavily on tools like Socotra, our policy admin system, HubSpot, and then also our engineering team is top notch and really leveraging a lot of AI. So that's been great to see. And we're continuously pushing for more. And so the innovation is not only to help us be more efficient as a team, but then to also serve the customer in an efficient way as well.
What's next for Sigo Seguros?
We would love to expand. So currently we're only selling in Texas, where we feel it we have a great market and a large demographic to be able to hit. So we'd love to expand to more states where we feel we have a similar market demographic to be able to reach more customers.
So, how do you see the insurance landscape changing? I mean, as much as we can predict it, which is very, very hard, but we're kind of uniquely positioned in the insurance sector to think about the future and think about modeling risk. What do you see changing within or without with the insurance industry in the US, or even globally?
I think that much like any other industry, AI is going to be a huge push for change within the next 5 years. It's funny, I was mentioning that I work out of a co-working space and we have innovation talks every Friday, and every single Friday the topic is AI. So I probably sound like a broken record, but I really think that it's true. I also think specifically for car insurance, there's always talk about autonomous vehicles and their impact on how the structure of car insurance will look. So that will definitely be a factor within our specific subsect of insurance. But apart from that, we're also looking and watching trends in cyber and trying to understand what's going to be the next thing with cyber security and cyber insurance. So that's another one that I've got my finger on the pulse of. But it'll be very interesting. I mean, overall, AI is definitely the answer here, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And, one of the things, being a startup founder myself, I'm seeing a lot of new startups coming in the AI space. For the founders out there, what advice would you give the founders that are actually trying to tackle underserved markets in their mission?
I would give the advice, if it's specifically within insurance, to balance the idea of being innovative with the idea of working within the constructs of a system that is very antiquated and very highly regulated. So finding the balance there, I found that at Beam, where I was previously, and then also at Sego, there's a constant dance between wanting to be different, but also realizing that there are a lot of things that have to stay the same in insurance, just given the level of regulation. So honoring that, finding the balance there, which I think Nestor and Julio have done a great job leading the team through at Sego. And then also just, again, as we were saying, sticking with the mission, but trying to focus on the idea of sticking with the mission for the long term. So making decisions that make you able to be in business tomorrow to help your customer at the same time. But overall, my advice would be to stick with it because there are definitely a ton of underserved sections of the market. So if anyone feels they can make a difference, they should do that.
What would equitable insurance look like if we got it right?
Yeah, it's a great question. I feel like there's always the idea of pricing to the risk and working towards making it fair for both the insured and the insurer. But at the same time, can we get rid of the noise of things that really aren't going to affect the risk factor? Can we get even smarter while still not being predatory? I think that that's harder to put an exact, blueprint around, but we're working towards it every day. And I think that we're getting a little closer with Sego, but there's still a lot more work to do.
Yeah, indeed. And you guys are doing the work. I think the fact that you guys are out there, you're in the weeds, you're making things happen. I think as the future comes along, you'll start to learn and there'll be even more that you guys will be doing. So thank you so much, Katie. We really appreciate you coming on to the show. Usually when we wrap up the show, we like to do what's known as like a lightning round, where we'll just ask questions as we close things up. So I'm gonna shoot you some questions. Cody's gonna shoot you some questions, and just whatever comes to mind, feel free to answer. Are you ready?
Okay, definitely.
Okay. Favorite tech tool you cannot live without?
For work specifically, I would say Hex. For life, my Aura Ring.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, I've seen, I think, is there like a Gucci version of the Aura Ring that they came out with, like an exclusive one?
I don't know about that, but I know that mine is my favorite thing. I love all the data, all the biometrics. I'm obsessed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been getting ads for those from a few years back. I don't know what I searched one day that made someone want to show me that, but they're like, hey, he's gonna buy one. They never got me, but I need to look into it more. What's
And
one misconception about insurance that you wish you could erase?
that it's boring. I think it's actually so much more interesting than your average everyday company. I mean, not to speak poorly of, for example, a t-shirt company, but if you have supply constraints for sure, but your idea is to sell as many t-shirts as you can. In insurance, there's a constant dance between, in our case, reinsurance and growing, but growing profitably and not growing too quickly because you have others that are able to cap your growth. And so growing in a profitable way is not only necessary for your bottom line, but also to be able to unlock future capacity later. So all these different intricacies of the market, and then also as we touched on the fact that there's so many underserved sections, make it so ripe for innovation. So I think it's the least boring thing there is.
Yeah, I love that. One book every insurtech leader should read.
So I really love the Future of Insurance books by, I believe his name's Brian Fulchuk. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Those are great. So the first one's around the incumbents. The second one is around the startups in the space. And I believe Beam is actually mentioned as one of the startups. So it's really cool to read about how, and now I believe there's four of them, and they also have a podcast. The podcast is also a great listen if you're looking for that.
Awesome.
Katie, where can people follow your work and learn more about Sego?
So Sigo is Sigo Seguros on all channels, and then I'd be happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn who wants to learn more. My name's Katie Upton, as we mentioned, and so you can find me on there. I'm happy to chat, happy to connect.
Katie, thank you so much for an amazing conversation.
Thank you
Really.
for having me.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us at the Snap Refund podcast, and we will catch you later. Take care. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.